And I look forward to our time together this evening. Our topic is the mourner's 6 tasks for healing. I offer to you the suggestions and thoughts in the words of 2 groups of people, the researchers who have studied suicide grief, and also the survivors who have been in this wilderness of grief before you. They have already walked the path you are walking now, and they've left trail markers along the way. They've grieved and mourned the loss of a loved one to suicide, and they have found healing and even joy again. The mourner's tasks that we will talk about tonight are not a passive progression of stages or phases you might have heard about in the past. The 6 tasks are actions that allow you to engage with your grief, to be active instead of passive, to adapt, and to keep moving forward. Working on these tasks can give you, the mourner, some sense of hope that there is something you can actually do to adapt to the death of your loved one, to reconcile and to integrate your loss and to heal. Okay, so Emily, my thing won't. Okay, I guess I have to take that off. Emily, help. There we go. Okay, these are the 6 tasks of mourning that we're going to talk about. I want you to think about, as you read through them, think about the fact that they don't have to be in any order. You can be working on many at the same time. Of course, as you look at them, you can see that some probably have to happen before the others do. So we're going to talk about accepting the reality of your loss, letting yourself feel the pain of the loss, remembering your loved one who has died, developing a new self-identity as you search for meaning, finding an enduring connection to your loved one as you embark on a new life, and letting others help you now and always. So as we're going through this list, reflect on your own grief journey and see where you might be at, what things you have done, what things you still might need to work on. Grief's a very fluid process. It's circular and spiral. It's certainly not linear. And most importantly, as you're working on the tasks of mourning, to be patient and compassionate with yourself. So mourner's task number 1 is accepting the reality of your loss. We sometimes hear a common saying that longest journey is from the head to the heart. And that describes our first task. Moving from what you know in your head to what you eventually will have to need to know in your heart, the intellectual to the emotional. You're going to be called on during this task to confront the reality, the harsh reality that someone you have loved dearly will not come back to you physically in this life. Actually, people often nickname the first year of loss as the year of magical thinking, where sometimes we're in and out of denial and we're imagining that they might come back, that they might walk into the room. That's the magical thinking part of it. In this task, you'll be called on to accept that loss is real and unchangeable. And that's probably likely the first step in adapting to the loss of your loved one. Because you're dealing with suicide loss, you're going to need more time to grasp this reality. Suicide loss is traumatic. It's unexpected, sudden, sometimes violent. And so there's a trauma part of all this grief that other griefs don't have. Maybe you'll want to take some grief breaks, pushing away the reality at time. That's okay. Almost like creating a psychological sanctuary for yourself, where you can voluntarily regulate your intense pain and you compartmentalize grief to be able to work with the challenges in your immediate environment, to do things that you need to do just to go on with daily living. Some denial is natural and protective, and that's okay in the beginning, but it eventually must give way to your acceptance of the reality. You might find yourself going back and forth between protesting the reality and confronting it. It's true, it's not true. It can't be true. Oh gosh, it is true. So that back and forth is what happens in this task of mourning. It's difficult to move to later tasks until the reality of your loss is acknowledged. So how will you know that you're working on acknowledging the reality of your loss? These are some ideas of things that you might have done or that you might be doing now or that you could plan to do so that you know that you're kind of focusing on the first task. We believe that accepting the reality of the loss often starts with the wake and the funeral services, visiting the graveside, picking the headstone, making plans for the ashes, planning memorial services, all those things that happen in the beginning. Researchers believe that it's really the way that we initiate healthy grieving. So we always like the idea that people have a plan in the beginning to say their goodbye. Sometimes in our culture, we rush through this beginning part of it, but we know that it's important to sit with this in the beginning. You might notice that you're beginning to change your language around the loss to reflect reality. You might be hearing yourself say, my mom died. She won't be calling me anymore. My son died. My wife is gone. You might find yourself talking more and more about the death to a safe listener. You're speaking in the past tense, using words like died and dead and death, which are so hard, but really important. You might see that you're finally saying the word suicide aloud in using your loved one's name. Sometimes in the beginning, people say, well, when she left us, or when the event happened, or when that happened, or when she went away. And when you start to say, and when she died by suicide, it's one more step toward facing the reality of the loss. Maybe you're looking at some of your loved ones' possessions and making plans to go through them, to donate, to give away to special people, and that would be meaningful. Changing the room decor of your loved one if that person lived with you. And of course, all this has to be on your timetable. Dreaming that your loved one is alive is an interesting concept. Researchers say that when we dream about our loved one and then we wake up and we realize that they are not alive, that sharp contrast on awakening is actually another way that we are able to work with the reality of our loss. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Then there's restorative retelling. As a survivor, you need to tell your story over and over, but only when you are ready. Telling the story is a natural way to release the trauma piece of your loss, to give your sorrow words. And stories shift over time. I see that in the loss program when people come to their meetings or I'm seeing somebody individually, their stories change as they tell them more, and they can tell them with less emotion, and they can tell them in a way that you know that they are making their story about their loved one. Naturally, you would be telling your story to your friends and family, maybe in a more edited version. When you go into more deep detail, it's probably best to do that with a trauma-informed therapist that can help you with the trauma piece of it, which is so difficult. So that's task number one. So as you're going over that screen, think about where you might be at there. Here's number two. Let yourself feel the pain of your loss. Feeling and expressing feelings, to touch and make them known. That's what expression is about. The huge paradox of grief is that we have to touch what is painful in order to heal. Feel to heal is a slogan that we use often, but it's so countercultural because we're afraid to feel in our culture. We take pills, we distract ourselves, we avoid, we're not accustomed to feeling discomfort, pain, anything that's not comfortable for us, we pull away from. And so this is a real challenge to be able to feel the pain, to sit with it, to embrace it. An outward expression of your pain is mourning. So we'll say that grieving is everything that you feel inside, and mourning is what people can see you do on the outside. And of course, crying is probably the number one most common example and behavior of mourning. So you can express feelings through writing, letters, journals, emails, putting your feelings into words, either writing them or talking about them, gives them shape. It helps you to identify them. What is it exactly that I'm feeling? You recognize them and you begin that slow integration. Feelings are teachers, so be curious about them and what they tell you. Try not to fear them or to deny them. Honor them, but gently and lovingly. The pain of loss is emotional and physical. You know, it's much more than sadness. It's all these feelings that are listed here and many more that you could share. And the trauma symptoms, such as re-experiencing the event and the intrusive reliving and being easily aroused and so vigilant and fearful about everyone else you love, is certainly part of feeling the pain of loss. And grievers are surprised by the physical nature of grief. Maybe you're experiencing that, just the heaviness, the like pile of rocks on your shoulders, all the aches and pains that come with grieving, that it's just so physical in so many ways. The world around you may discourage you from feeling your pain. You probably have had people say to you, now carry on, keep your chin up. He wouldn't want you to be sad. She's at peace now. She's in a better place. People say those things hoping that we'll feel better, but they really just dismiss your feelings. And so those people that probably say those things to you aren't going to be the safest to be around. Sometimes the world sees you cry and runs and gets you a Kleenex. And sometimes the message is, stop crying, wipe away your tears, move on, let's change the subject. And the truth is that crying is so healing and so therapeutic. And my gosh, how could you not be crying almost every minute when you lose someone so dear to you? So try to not let the world discourage you from healthy grieving. And as some of those same people make comments that cause you to suppress your feelings instead of to express them. They're going to pay you compliments. You look great. Oh, you look like you're doing so well. How strong you are. Keep busy now. Distract yourself. Don't think about it. You will not understand what you're going through. We always tell people, remember the rule of thirds. When you think about everyone you know in your life, a third of them will be empathic helpers. Those are going to be the safe people that you want to stay close to. Then there's the neutral bystanders. They don't know what to say, and they just sort of hang out, and they don't say anything negative, but they don't say anything really helpful. And then that third group are the harmful hurters, and they're the ones that are saying some of those things that we just talked about. So find the empathic helpers and stick with them. During this time when you're feeling the pain of your loss and working on the second task, you will have to small dose yourself on the pain of grief and take grief breaks once in a while. But other times you might feel like you can find a safe place and move toward your pain. Feel it, lean into it, walk into it, sit with it. Pain will keep trying to get your attention until you have the courage to gently be with it in small doses and be open to its presence. Honors love you have for your person. That's what feeling the pain does. Grief is love that has nowhere to go. That was spoken by actually one of my clients to me one time, one of the survivors. So think about, yeah, this is a tough task of mourning? And how will you know that you're feeling and healthfully expressing the pain of your grief? These are some things that you might be noticing within yourself, that you are naming and acknowledging your feelings, that you're mourning, you're outwardly expressing your feelings. You're not trying to distract yourself or avoid feelings. You're writing, journaling. You're finding safe people to share your feelings with. This is an interesting one. You're seeking restorative spaces. There is an author who wrote a wonderful book called Bearing the Unbearable. Her name is Joanna Cacciatore, and she's a researcher, and she wrote about the restorative nature of the space of nature, animals, and pets. And in her research, people shared, they self-reported that their animals and their pets ran rings around some of the people in their life as far as support. So find your restorative space wherever that would be. You might know that you're working on feeling your feelings when you're allowing yourself to cry alone and with others who are safe. You're acknowledging positive and negative feelings and memories, and you're finding a balance between them. Your special person that you've lost is looking more real in your eyes, nice balanced view of that person. You're able to talk about what you miss and even what you don't miss about your loved one. And that balanced view, oddly enough, promotes healing, even though sometimes you might feel a little like, oh, I shouldn't think about how crabby he was. But the research tells us that balanced view promotes healing. You might be learning to dose your grief by embracing and honoring your feelings. Then you can back away for a little while before re-engaging. We know that healthful grieving, people go from a loss orientation to a restoration orientation, which means that you move between these two ways of coping in order to voluntarily regulate your pain. In the beginning, you're in the loss orientation and you're immersed in the reality of the loss, and you're dealing with such intense emotions and feelings and thoughts. And that's pretty involuntary at first. But then you might notice as time goes on that you swing a little bit toward the restoration way of coping. You put your grief on the back burner while you learn to cope with your changed world, and you're reconstructing and re-engaging in life without your person. We call it self-dosing your grief. You're moving from involuntary to voluntary process of grieving, and that actual movement, changing back and forth, enhances healing. You're curious about your feelings. You may even read some grief books or look at a website or join a grief support group to come to a better understanding of what you're feeling. And we know that you're starting to let yourself work on task 2 when you begin to be kind to your body and your mind and your soul, taking care of yourself, making sure you get good sleep, eating nutritiously, exercising. And if you're feeling any post-traumatic stress or any trauma symptoms, you might notice you're starting to work on those by 2 really helpful ways to deal with trauma: by moving, walking, exercising, and grounding exercises. When you start to relive the experience and you feel like you're re-experiencing it, that you can ground yourself in the present and say, that's not happening right now. That happened last year. I don't need to relive that. Today is a different day. And so if you're feeling trauma symptoms, those are some good ideas of ways that you can ease those feelings of trauma. So mourner's task number 3 is to remember. Remembering is such an important part of healing. Remembering your loved one who has died, sometimes scary at first, feeling too sad. People will often say, I'm so sad to remember, I don't want to do that. And so grievers might avoid remembering their loved one because it's too painful. And some survivors feel extra pain at the changing of the seasons, and the coming of a new year, you find those to be really difficult. So those could be challenges. Survivors might feel they're going to forget their loved one, or that others will as time passes. The woman who is the researcher that wrote about the wonderful effect of pets and animals lost her daughter at Arizona State University. And she said, my daughter is gone, but I need to bring her presence into this world. And so we can do that by remembering, especially planning and engaging in rituals of remembrance that can give you a sense of control and order when life is feeling chaotic and you're feeling powerless. It's important to call back into your heart those you have loved and lost, even when those memories come with deep longing and sadness. Rituals are really helpful, and they're designed to give messages to invite your loved one into your world as it is now, to keep that enduring connection to him or her, and to continue the attachment bonds that you always had. So rituals of remembrance will be really an important part of your healing. There's different kinds of rituals, and I just listed a few here and kind of what their meaning leans toward. So there's rituals of continuity, like I'm just remembering the person in a memorial or a mass or some kind of ceremony. And maybe there's a ritual of transition. I'm giving away special items to show that I'm entering a new place in my grief. So I might pick out special people that I'm going to give my loved ones things to. There's rituals of reconciliation, letter writing, to ask your loved one for forgiveness or to extend your forgiveness to them if the relationship needs some repair. And there's rituals of affirmation where you express gratitude and you acknowledge their life and all their gifts to you. So how to remember your loved one who has died and what rituals of remembrance you might find comforting. So many ideas, and I know you've done some of these yourself. So as you look down the list, think about, well, what you've done, what you maybe could see yourself doing, something that might have really special meaning to you. Sometimes people have a hard time looking at photos, but in your own time, when you're ready, you might display photos and look at photo albums. How about saving keepsakes and linking objects? You could have a special box close by where you have keepsakes. And I just love one of the meetings that we had, a facilitator was sharing that she took special things of her son's. She put them aside, and then she had a custom chest made that became a beautiful piece of furniture in her dining room. And she put all her son's things in there. And so anytime she wanted, she could go into her dining room and open that box and look at, he died before his graduation from high school. And so she would look at like all the special keepsakes that she had from him for the first 18 years. And because they were close by her and they were in this special box, I thought that was like such a good idea. Some people will use and wear the clothing of their loved ones, the jewelry. They'll wrap themselves in the blankets or the fleece jackets of their special people. So a way to link, stay close to the person. Some people visit places of special meaning that recall memories, really good memories of time spent together. Think about where you feel closest to your loved one. Could you go there? Could you take a little trip to a place where you just feel their presence and their spirit? Maybe you would want to talk about or write your favorite memories. You could share them, or you could just keep them for yourself. Reminiscing and telling stories about your loved one can be so healing, and prompts always help. So if you're with a group of people at your family at a gathering, you could even start yourself to make it okay for everyone else to follow suit and share a story. And you could even have a prompt. Tell us a funny story about Jim, or I want to share something that I'm thinking about with Susan. And that can be really helpful. You can create your own memory book. You can light a candle at special times, or heck, every day. Sometimes that's what survivors do. And you can listen to your loved one's favorite music and eat the foods they loved and talk about them while you're doing that. You can remember them in a religious ritual. Donate in your loved one's name, and perhaps choose a call that's meaningful to you or to your person. Holidays provide quite an opportunity to engage in rituals of remembrance alone and with others. So many ways to remember your loved one. Some people like to plant something living that's alive, a tree, flowers, a memorial garden. So maybe as you look over that list, something might pique your interest, and you might decide that that's something that you could do in the near future, especially with the holidays coming up. The mourner's task number 4 is your challenge to develop a new identity as you search for meaning. This is a tough one because you've got really kind of 2 different things. So I'm going to develop a new identity and search for meaning, and my loved one's not here. But think about how your identity has been deeply impacted by your loss. Think about your own loss right now. Has it changed the way you think about yourself? How you define yourself? The story you tell yourself about who you really are? Who you are with your friends and your family? Has the loss impacted your spiritual identity, your financial identity? I think we're most aware of identity when something changes. And maybe even before that, we don't think much about it. So the challenge is to accept that your identity is going to be different than it was before. And the world will challenge that. They'll say things to you like, when is the old Steve coming back? When are you going to be your old self again? They just don't have a clue that the old Steve's gone. And you accepting it will help you to let them know that you are forever changed and you're regaining a new sense of self. As you search for a new identity, try to make meaning out of what happened, trying to make sense out of something that was so senseless. You know, people tend to be driven by a need to find or create a sense of purpose or meaning in their lives. And I think we all feel a little more fulfilled when we know we have that. So searching for meaning for survivors becomes asking the tough questions, making sense of or coming to understand what has happened in a different way, even maybe finding benefit or positives in the loss. Very difficult with suicide loss to just even imagine a benefit. It seems disrespectful to even think about that. But there's something that we refer to called post-traumatic growth, and that is possible even after a suicide loss. And post-traumatic growth means that I'm not immersed in the intensity of the loss of my loved one, and I'm starting to see a new identity for myself. And I'm starting to create a story about my loved one. And I'm starting to even see that I feel a little different in maybe some positive ways that I didn't before. Like, I think I'm more compassionate and less judgmental than I used to be. Reconstructing a new orientation to the world, developing a story, a narrative, your story about your life after loss, your story about your loved one. And after you have asked all the questions and gone through your whole detective phase of why and how and shoulda, woulda, coulda, and what if, and why didn't they, and all those things that survivors always deal with, you may begin to make a story using the best answers that you have, because the person that has the answers is gone now. Your assumptive world as a survivor has been shattered, and it's going to need to be repaired. Your worldview has been shaken to the core. You're left searching for meaning. You had ideas about safety and predictability and control and everything you took for granted before your loss is being questioned now constantly. And you're left to think about what matters to me now. What's my second most important desire? Because I can't have my loved one back, which is number one. So now what? Now what matters to me? What would I be most desiring? And I find it when I'm working with individual survivors and we talk about this, they're able to go to the next desire, which usually is the peace to be able to survive and thrive and have a life without my person. So there are things that you will find when you ask yourself that you will be able to come up with answers about what really matters to you now that your partner is gone, or your child, or your sibling, or your friend. This is really a very challenging task for mourners. So how do you know that you're working on this task? These are some things you might see yourself that kind of give you a clue that you're kind of working on this part. You're learning skills to perform tasks that your loved one took care of when he or she was here. It could be practical things like cutting the lawn or taking out the garbage, or I'm handling things that, wow, I used to just divert to my husband for. You're becoming aware of some positive aspects of your changed self-identity. You're seeing yourself as more understanding, less judgmental. A lot of times survivors will say, it's really taught me that everybody has something. You never know when you meet somebody what they've just been through. You're developing a new feeling of confidence, defining the loss and finding a benefit. You're beginning to feel empowered to go on living, even as you continue to feel a sense of loss. So this is interesting because they're totally opposite, but they can coexist so that you can feel both empowered to go on living and you can feel a sense of sadness over the loss. You know, in our world, we tend to think of either or thinking. It's either this or this. It can't be both. So if you're empowered to go on living, it means that you don't feel sad anymore. But that's not true. It actually, we live in both and thinking. It's like, yes, I feel both empowered and devastatingly sad at the same time. Those opposites exist together. You might see yourself becoming aware that you had ideas of control before the death of your loved one, and you have some now. You're starting to discover them again. You see yourself reestablishing routines and engaging in self-care. You're taking care of yourself. You're making sure that you sleep. Restorative sleep is so, so crucial. You're kind of caring now more about eating nutritiously and maybe even taking some walks and exercising and connecting with people that you haven't seen for a while. And so you're learning to care for yourself. You're noticing your search for questions about the death of your loved one is easing. All those early questions are starting to phase out a bit. So you might notice that. You're beginning to develop a bearable narrative of the suicide, which is the story that gives you relief from the why questions and offers you a realistic explanation.
Okay, we'll take her to see a movie like they did last week. If it's what is she there? Children's movie. Oh, she is there.
Okay. All right, are we good? Okay. You're getting a fair explanation of what's happened to your loved one. You're making that story. We call it the bearable narrative. It's not the story that you would like to have written, but it's the one that you've got now with the best answers that you can find. You're accepting the blind spots that are so common after suicide. Just as the fact that the only person who can answer your why questions is now gone, and they can't explain their behavior to you. And so you're left on your own to find your best answers that you can live with. You find yourself accepting that death can happen at any time, and the world is unpredictable. And you're starting to make a different assumptive world, that suffering in life is inevitable, but that you have the ability and the power to make choices about how you will respond. You're noticing signs of healing, and you're thinking more about reinvesting in your life. You're feeling resilient, and you're thinking about opportunities for your own development. And you're beginning to see your own strengths again. And that does happen. And you can hold hope that with healthy grieving, you'll come to that place. Mourner's task number 5, finding an enduring connection to your loved one as you embark on a new life. And another task that seems like it has two opposites. And it's maybe the most difficult task to accomplish because it's ongoing, takes a while. So attachment to your loved one is being transformed from one of physical reality to one of psychic or spiritual reality, one of presence to one of memory. Death ends a life, but not a relationship. So you must find ways to memorialize your loved one, to keep them with you, but keep them in a way that will allow you to go on with your life. You can both heal and hold on to your loved one at the same time. And some people think that that can't happen, but it's exactly what goes on in this task of mourning and in healthy grieving. Survivors find an appropriate place for their loved one in their emotional life, a place that will enable the survivor to go on living effectively in their new world. You can still have what you lost, although it's transformed. You can still have love and memories. You can have your loved one's influences, inspirations, values, meanings, and you can embody them in your life. And also you can embark on a new life. So that goes back to the both and thinking versus the either or thinking. So we're going to go with both and. You might notice at this time with this task that you're kind of feeling like, okay, I don't have to suffer forever. And hope starts to creep in. You might see ways to maintain your connection with your loved one, to keep in touch with their friends, treasure keepsakes, do what your person taught you to value. Recognize their giveaways to you, which are the gifts they gave, what they taught you. You might move from the focus on their death to their life. And you create a durable biography, storytelling, sharing, remembering that continues on forever. You might in this time set an intention to heal, and that can be helpful to survivors at this point. You can create a space to heal. You have personal responsibility to take action that's sustaining. You move from passive to active participant, and you commit to positively influencing the course of your journey. And so this might give you some idea that lets you know that you're in this task of mourning and blending these two paths to healing. You're creating continuing bonds with your loved one. You're finding joy in positive shared experiences, and you feel that part of your relationship with them is alive. You're repairing the relationship and making peace with unfinished business if that's necessary. You're practicing forgiveness with them if you have the need. And next month, the first Monday of October, is going to be a wonderful talk on forgiveness. So important in healing. So be sure to stay tuned for that talk. Maybe in this mourner's task, you are finding a different way to hold on to the relationship with your loved one. You're engaging in remembrance rituals that provide a way to acknowledge your loss while you get on with your life at the same time. You're finding an important and special place for your loved one in your life, but a place that leaves room for others and a place that enables you to go on living in the world. So that's so important. You're finding reasons to go on with your own life, despite the emotional pain and the real life problems that are always left in the wake of suicide. And even not even knowing the answers, you're still finding reasons to go on. You're discovering answers to questions like, why do I want to continue on? What are my reasons for living? What matters to me now? What are my best hopes? You're realizing that you can't change the loss, and so perhaps you can redefine hopes, even the smallest ones, that you can begin to speak. You may be experiencing signs of the post-traumatic growth that we talked about, changing your outlook on life, greater resilience in stress, being maybe able to socialize a little more, and finding you have increased behaviors such as compassion and non-judgment and hope. You're feeling moments of hope, and you're setting intentions to heal. What does an intention to heal look like? So this is why we suggest that people try it, because the intention to heal is a positive commitment you make to yourself. You're being conscious of what you want to experience and committing to that. You're taking deliberate and personal responsibility with actions that will be self-sustaining and supportive to you. You have a willingness to move toward your pain, even though it hurts. You positively are going to influence the course of your grief journey. You can journal your intentions, you can speak them, you can pray them, and you experience a greater openness to the expectation that you're going to heal. So when you're setting an intention, you're expecting that very well may come about. So often survivors will tell us, I just want to feel better. I just don't want to keep being so sad for so long. So we think intentions to heal can help on this grief journey. So you're opening yourself up to how your loss has changed you. You're seeing the unknown and painful world. You're ready to explore the mystery. You have to live through the mystery to find the way. You know, Father Ruby, who was head of the loss program and created it 42 or 3 years ago, always describes suicide as a mystery. And so here we're saying, take on the challenge to live through the mystery, to find your way, and commit yourself to paying attention to your anguish in ways that allow you to breathe life into your soul again. In loss, we're in what we call the liminal space, like life you knew no longer exists, the future hasn't yet come, and you're in a state of unknowing. So we think being open to the state of not knowing and being okay with it, living the questions, even the ones that don't have the answers, living through emotions that seem to arise out of nowhere, these are all fertile ground for healing. That liminal space is a place where healing can start. Here's some examples of healing intentions. Like if you were to write about them or talk about them or journal about them, and you can kind of tweak them yourself and see, you know, what you'd like to say about an intention. But here are some examples. For instance, you might say that in this moment, I will stay open to my pain, for it is both a testament to my love and it's my teacher. I don't know what the next moment will bring, but I will embrace myself with compassion, and I will learn how to live with my new reality. Another intention, I'm willing to go into the unknown of my grief. I trust myself in my process. And another, I can and will reach out for support in my grief. I will become filled with hope that I can and I will survive this loss. So think about what an intention would be that you'd be willing to commit to. Here's task number 6. Let others help you now and always. Please don't grieve and mourn alone. Be compassionate with yourself and reach out to others for support. You don't have to instinctively know what to do and how to be with your grief. You can reach out to others who have walked this path before. In fact, we know from research that the quality and quantity of understanding and compassionate support that you get during your work of mourning will greatly impact your capacity for healing. So that's how important loving support is. Your sense of who you are and where you are in your healing journey comes in part from the care and response of people close to you. They hold up a mirror where you see a reflection of yourself, who you are and where you are on this journey. People who listen attentively, deeply, and non-judgmentally can be found in the least expected places. And survivors will tell us this all the time. People they expected to step forward and be their support just could not do it. Couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, didn't know how. And that they found their support in the least likely places from people that they would never imagined that came forward and knew exactly what to say. So be attentive to that. Let yourself be touched by the experiences of mourners that have preceded you. They can offer you inner strength and hope. They'll be companions at your side, and they'll allow you to express your grief long after society thinks it is appropriate. Because we all know society puts the ending on that. Like, oh, you're still grieving? Oh, you still feel sad? Oh, still? So you have to find the people that get you and what you're going through. So how do you know you're building your support system and you're reaching out for healing? You allow others to express their love for you and care for you. You're remembering and accepting the rules of thirds. Remember that? The empathic helpers, the neutral bystanders, and the harmful hurters. So you accept that there's people in your life that will not be able to support you. And they just either don't know how or they have chosen not to. So go with the empathic helpers. You find yourself choosing to invite others to companion you on your journey, to walk by your side. You listen to the experiences and encouragement of friends, fellow mourners, counselors. You avoid those who give you messages to hurry up, move on, get over it, let go, get on with your life, feel better. Or you can decide that you're going to teach them. There is a speaker by the name of Tom Zuba who lost several people in his family to illness. And he always says, the grievers are the teachers. So if you have the energy, you can interact with the people that aren't supportive and you can teach them what grievers need. So you're looking to those who understand you, and they're allowed and encouraged to mourn. They're allowing you and encouraging you to mourn long after the death. Supporters, true supporters, see mourning not as an enemy, but as a result of having loved and been loved. And you realize that you can benefit from the connectedness that comes from people who have lost a loved one to suicide. And we in the Loss Program invite you to those opportunities in our groups. We have so many different kinds of groups specifically for certain populations, such as parents who have lost a child, spouses who have lost their partner, a men's group. We have general groups. We have an 8-week closed group where people stay with the same people for 8 weeks and form strong bonds with the people, and they get to know the loved ones of the people that have died. If you're a reader, here are some books that you might be interested in. These are some of my favorites. Understanding Your Suicide Grief is a very compassionate guide that focuses on hope and healing. It's a very gentle walkthrough of grief. And the author, Ellen Wolfelt, talks about 10 touchstones. And you'll see the 6 tasks of mourning in this book. And there's a companion journal that is great for unburdening your heart and soul. And there's lots of questions to reflect on and write on. Then we have No Time to Say Goodbye, which is a pretty frank and detailed and sometimes graphic discussion of many examples of stories of loss. The loss program often recommends this, but I've had some people recently in an 8-week group tell me that it was a little tough for them early on in grief. So you might want to consider that that might be for later, or maybe it would not be the best book for you. It's up to you. Then we have Healing Your Grieving Heart. That's the same author as Understanding Suicide Grief. And he has 100 ideas that are very practical things that you can do, suggestions of healing activities. Bearing the Unbearable is the woman who lost her daughter at Arizona State. And she does the research on the pets. And this is a powerful book. And it's very short chapters that only are a couple of pages, but it's intense, but one of my favorites. Resilient Grieving is one that helps the survivor to relearn their world, find ways to grow. The author lost her daughter, 12-year-old daughter, in a car accident. But she specifically has found ways to move forward and embrace life again. And it's a good read from her. And then It's Okay That You're Not Okay is quite an interesting book that talks a lot about how the world looks at grievers, but some of her language is so loving and meaningful. She talks about loss as something that cannot be fixed, but only carried, and that grief cannot be solved. It can only be tended to. So I love the statement, we carry our grief forever and we tend to it as we need to. And you probably know that. Sometimes you might have a time that you're coasting and your grief doesn't really need anything special. And there's other times that, wow, everything you've got in you to tend to it. And she talks a lot about the world's response and how to navigate it, how to kind of get past the world. And then here's 2 books that, if people want more information about understanding suicide, the act, the suicidal mind, Thomas Joyner is quite a popular researcher that's written a few books, and he lost his dad to suicide. So he talks about personal experience. He dismantles a lot of the myths about suicide, which I think suicide is so unique for grievers, in that sometimes people need like the psychoeducation piece to understand some of the research about this type of act and the grief that comes with it. So I think it would help you understand what suicide is and what it's not. And he brings a very compassionate understanding to it. And both of these books have clinical cases and studies and, media reports. And it could be, if you're a reader, if you would like to have some book therapy, those would be some good ideas. And so in ending tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit just about a very lovely practice that's called kintsugi. And it's about repairing things that are broken. And when I think about our society, especially here in the US, we throw away things that are broken. They seem to be of no value to us, and we just dump them and we decide to buy something new. So I think about if our society, if our culture is like that, what does that say about broken hearts and broken people? You've all been a part of that. And so I just want to leave you with this thought about the art of precious scars, kintsugi. It's an ancient Japanese art that mends broken pottery and jewelry in the areas where it's broken. And kintsugi uses precious metals such as gold, silver, and platinum. And it's generally believed that repairing the object is said to render it more beautiful than even before it was broken. There's no attempt to hide the damage. Actually, the repair is literally illuminated. So you see all the cracks and they're filled with these beautiful, precious stones and gems, and the places of brokenness are embraced. They're not hidden. So with this technique, it's possible to create true and always different works of art, each one with its own story and its own beauty, thanks to the unique cracks that are formed when the object breaks. It's almost as if they were metaphors for wounds that leave different marks on each of you. The message of kintsugi is such a beautiful one when we consider all the broken hearts on this planet. So using this as a metaphor for healing ourselves teaches us an important lesson, that sometimes in the process of repairing our broken places, we actually create something more unique, more beautiful, more resilient. So think of yourself as having this precious scar that's illuminated by gold and silver and platinum, and appreciate and love the uniqueness. Healing grieving, healthy grieving is not easy, that's for sure. But when you think about it, what in life that's worthwhile really is easy? The things people cherish most are typically things that bear the greatest cost to them. So try not to let the hard work of healthy grieving scare you away from engaging in the 6 tasks. Just try it. They're truly the path to healing. And the Lost App continues to hold hope that each of our survivors will experience the peace that comes with this healing. We are honored to walk this sacred journey alongside you. We really are. So thank you for your attention. And now we'll see if there's any other questions or any information in the chat, Emily.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was just, I will just make a comment briefly and just say, I really love the way that you outline that, both with the tasks of grief and how people can identify sort of where they are. And I think that, you know, one of the things I hear so often in our program is just, what do we do with this? You know, that I know I'm feeling it, I know I'm in it, but what can I do? And I think that, you know, blended in there were some philosophical thoughts, some really concrete things. And so I thank you so much. If it's okay, Michelle, I'm going to pause the sharing just in case anyone wants to share. Actually, I guess I can share my camera too, in case anybody wants to turn their camera on and ask a question. But we do have a couple comments. So we just have one that just says, hold on a second, I just closed myself out of it. There we go. Amazing presentation. I love the piece about the Japanese art. I think I've heard it before, but what a wonderful metaphor to bring into grief work, which I agree. I think it's really wonderful. And I have to say, it's something my mom took away when you gave our presentation last year. It's something she's really taken to heart too. And then another one about, I love learning about the kintsugi. I'm looking to maybe buying a book. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was so helpful. Thank you for the presentation and the tasks for healing. I need this and hope one day to do just what you're doing. That's so nice. I think that a lot of us a lot of us in loss are looking for ways to connect with others and to give back some of that healing that we've received too. I needed a pick me up for my wedding anniversary coming up, and this really did the trick, reminded me how to get back online and back with my progress. Thank you so much for your insights. And yes, I do see a question on here that just says, how can we access the recorded presentation? So I am working on getting this presentation and a couple of our others up on our YouTube channel. So I'm hoping to be able to email that to folks soon. I had a couple of glitches getting a couple of them up there, but should be able to send that out to folks soon, and hopefully can pass it on to folks who weren't able to join us. But yeah, if anyone does have any questions, feel free, go ahead and put them in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to ask Michelle while we've got her here. Can you send the book recommendations? Yes, so we can do that. I can make a list for myself. And then a question about the email list. If you received the email to join our presentation today, you should be on the email list. So if it was forwarded to you by someone else and you're looking to get added, I can actually, I'm going to put an email address in here. So it's just loss@catholiccharities.net. A little kind of easy to remember, but that'll go to us here at the program. And so if there is ever you want to get into any of the other lists or anything like that, just feel free to give us an email. But if you did receive it today, you should receive it for the next one too. You are a gift to us all, and I'm so grateful for you and your wisdom. I agree with that, Michelle. So thank you, Kristen, for that comment. I agree with that. Many things that encourages me to work with labyrinth work as a healing path, just learning, but we have a good source. Oh, in Oklahoma. Hi, Denise. I know who's joining us from there. Hi, Denise. And I agree. There are some labyrinths here in the city too that I know have been beneficial to folks, that sort of meditative sort of piece. Thank you. It's important information, important work. Absolutely. A lot of us here. Hi, Denise.
You know, I think I've learned most of what I know about suicide loss and suicide grief from the survivors I've worked with over the last 8 years. I don't think I came to loss knowing a lot about suicide. We certainly, before we were therapists, in the program, we were given a lot of things to read. And that was so helpful. But it's just sort of like with how book learning goes. You read it and you get it, and then you sit with people and say, there's nothing in that reading that's going to help me sit with this person. And I think I'm humble, and I'm just, I don't know what the word is, just really, it's a sacred space when you're people that are grieving suicide loss. And I feel like the facilitators that are in the group that I'm the clinician at have taught me so much, and all the grievers. I haven't lost a loved one to suicide, so I'm just always learning from the people that allow me to walk the journey with them, and I'm grateful for that. What I would love to know is if anyone wants to speak up and maybe share where they see that they are with those tasks. We have like about 15 minutes, I think. Did that ring or true or speak to anybody?
Hi, Michelle, it's Jeannie. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Jeannie.
Good. I really enjoyed seeing that task list. I think I'm like about 2/3 through it. I think like the part where you said you can, think of your loved one and the happy memories, and I'm not quite there. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I'm about there, it's not quite fully through it yet, but certainly have made a lot of progress, and all the things you said were a great reminder. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that, or yeah, I've done that. So it was a wonderful list.
Oh, thanks, Jeannie. Good for you. Is anyone kind of stuck on any of the tasks and feeling like, oh, I need to work on that one?
Hi, this is Rita. And
Hi, Rita.
thank you so much for your presentation. Yes, I'm stuck. My son's been gone for 5 years, and there's still so much sadness surrounding his death. You know, prior to his death, and the circumstances of his death, which are rather unique. You know, the sadness afterwards. It's very difficult for me to think of my son and not be sad. That longing for him and all of the sadness that happened. So I don't know how to get unstuck.
The fact that you're thinking about him with sadness and feelings, I wouldn't say, oh, you're stuck. I would say, well, that's pretty natural for the loss, and who wouldn't be sad? I guess what I would ask is, are there other feelings that you feel? Remember we talked about, like, you can feel sad and devastated about the loss, and you can feel something positive about something else. So, like, do you see that you can hold opposite feelings together at the same time?
I can, but not about him.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it took me 3 years, and the guilt group that Sharon did, for me to, you know, even get to a place where I could think about anything else or feel any joy. I had like the anhedonia for such a long time. And so I can think about, you know, I can have sad feelings and happy feelings like with my grandkids, but I can't reach any happy feelings when it comes to him. Even when I see his baby pictures, I mean, it just makes me cry.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can only imagine how sad that is. Do you think you're pretty open to feeling the feelings? Would you be interested in setting an intention to heal, like to more actively make a healing intention statement and maybe try that?
Yeah, I could try that. Yeah, I didn't I didn't connect it. So yeah, I could try that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Rita. That's so kind of you to share. And I, you know, just someone also made a comment on here, Michelle, and I think it kind of relates, reminding us that the AFSP Out of the Darkness Prevention Walk is coming up. And so, you know, it's Suicide Prevention Month. And I know that for a lot of us here in loss, that is such a tricky subject in some ways. Because all of us come here because we've already lost our person, we've already lost our loved one. And so, you know, prevention becomes one of those things, I think, though, that a lot of our members choose to spend a lot of time and effort doing, because that's kind of where they find their meaning is, I want to feel like I'm in a place where I am helping other families avoid this exact pain, this exact feeling that I'm in. And I know that, you know, that's a place where a lot of people kind of find a niche or a sort of a home, is kind of working in mental health or in, you know, sort of supporting others who are going through something similar. And so, yes, that is coming up if anyone is interested, in the first weekend in October.
Emily, that's so interesting that you mentioned that about the Suicide Awareness Month. I attended a seminar just recently on suicide bereavement, and they were the speaker was talking about the message that comes with Suicide Awareness Month and how difficult that can be for suicide survivors, because they're often enmeshed in their own thoughts and feelings of guilt about, could they have prevented it? What should they have differently.
Right.
All the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. And so then this big month comes where there's all kinds of things being done. And where does that leave the people who have had suicide loss in their life? And is the message that's helpful to them or not?
Right. Right. Absolutely. Oh, I see a raised hand. Janet, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah. I'm wondering if you have anything to say for people who are struggling with anger at their loved one for suiciding. And I know that, my uncle died from suicide, and my cousin is having a hard time healing, particularly because he's so angry. But it's hard for him to admit being angry because then he feels guilty.
Yeah. Anger is almost a safe emotion because everybody knows what it's like to be angry. So I'm going to be angry instead of feeling the feelings that are really under the anger. And, anger covers up all those hurt feelings and the sadness and the betrayal and the guilt and just you name it. And I think that sometimes people find it easier to be angry than to look underneath the anger at all the other things they're feeling. Anger is often just in psychology called an umbrella feeling or a secondary feeling. It comes as a result of all the primary feelings that are underneath it. And so the challenge is to confront and be with those other feelings, name them, identify them, talk about them, write about them. And that's scary. That's scary for people because I don't know, sometimes somehow we get to accept anger more easily.
But is that really true? Because I think some people have a really hard time being angry. And I'm just wondering, I thought anger was one of the stages of grief. And if you can't let yourself feel any anger, I mean, but I know in my process over my uncle, and I feel I have healed a lot, but there certainly has, there's good reason to be angry. And yeah, there are other feelings too, but I'm just wondering if you can't let yourself be angry, but you feel it, but you can't let yourself, even though there are other feelings underneath it too. I'm wondering if that blocks you, because that feels like what is happening with my cousin.
You absolutely.
Is it okay to be angry? Isn't it okay to be angry?
Absolutely. Okay. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that you had to feel the other feelings and not the anger. Oh my goodness. Anger is such a common feeling of loss and grief. Absolutely. And yes, you feel it. Whatever feelings you have, sit with them, embrace them, talk about them, cry about them, scream about them, write about them, whatever you need to do. I'm
just wondering what you do for people who can't let themselves feel angry, but it starts to be clear that they are, but they feel too guilty to be angry.
You work with them to try to get them to a place of safety and expression, that no matter what you've got, your feelings are your feelings. You're entitled to every one of them. There's no judgment. They're not good or bad. They're not etched in stone. They're not facts. They're emotions. They're feelings. And so in our society, we're not like so comfortable about feelings, and there's one that we stuff and try to hide. And so when I'm working individually with somebody, well, once there's enough rapport in a therapy situation, people feel a sense of safety, and then they start poking into the things that they've been afraid of. And, maybe there's some people feel shame about the feelings that they're feeling, and it's only through trusting the counseling relationship that people can risk telling you some of their feelings, and then it's a non-judgmental venue, and then they can feel safe to be able to do that. You can only feel what you feel at the time, and some people need to stay in their anger for a while before they're ready to move on to anything else. And I guess it's just like where you're at is where you're at right then.
So what you're saying too is that somebody could be stuck in their grieving process because they feel angry, but they can't admit to themselves that they're angry consciously because they're too ashamed or guilty about feeling angry. And if you can't let yourself admit that you feel angry, then you can't heal it. So that would have to come out of therapy.
Yes. And you would have to, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there with, you have to be able to speak it and to feel safe about feeling the anger. And just one other thing that you talked about when you said anger is one of the stages of grief. And anger is definitely a feeling that's part of grief. The stages of grief are kind of, they're old thinking. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the famous person that talked all about the stages of grief: the shock, denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. But her work was with dying people. It was what the person who is dying was feeling. It wasn't about the survivor. And then it was brought along inaccurately to describe what people around the person were feeling, the survivors, the people that were having the loss. And so we've kind of moved away from the stages and phases of grief and gone more to tasks or things that survivors have to learn in order to heal, or things they have to work on. But you're absolutely right about anger. I mean, oh my goodness. Feelings are okay. Any feelings that somebody has, and they need to be validated, and when people feel safe, and they'll be authentic and they'll be real, and they'll be like, all right, I never told anybody this before, but I am so angry at my husband for dying. So
okay,
thanks for sharing that, Janet.
Thanks.
Absolutely, Jan. It certainly speaks to the layers and the complexity of what this looks like for us. That's true. And there, just because Michelle, you had asked about if anyone sort of saw themselves in a certain place, someone did say that finding a positive from the suicide loss is very hard. Not impossible, but very hard. And that, I think, is something a lot of us can relate to also.
Yeah. And you have to give yourself time. You know, we always hear time heals everything. Time heals all hurts. But it really isn't the passage of time that does it. It's what you do during that time that creates the healing. You do the healing. It's not time that does it. So you do the healing, and it takes time. And you all know it can really take a lot of time. So you have to be gentle with yourself and patient and compassionate. Self-compassion sometimes is hard. Compassion is such a wonderful quality that we give to others, but often don't give to ourselves. So be patient with yourself, be compassionate to yourself, and, you know, just, you're on your own timetable, and that's okay.
Hi there. I see a.
Can you hear me?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. I wish that I had you, Michelle, 19, 20 years ago when my son committed suicide. Back then, there really wasn't anything. There was nothing offered in the area. So it was putting one foot in front of the other, leaning on my family. He was one of 6 children, so I still had young children still. And just to try and stay focused, to try and take care of myself. And I was working and running a preschool too at the same time. And so a lot of the things that you had said, you know, I experienced. But somehow there was my caring for others seemed to have taken the focus a little bit off myself, because I couldn't sit around moping all the time when I still had young children and parents to take care of and still a school to run. So I think in that way it was sort of a blessing, and I would be sitting with my husband and just pouring my heart out. And he was so good because, you know, he was grieving as well. And I had some very dear friends that took me away for a weekend, and I just poured my heart out to them as well. And years went by, and probably about 6 or 7, when I was approached by a bereavement minister in the church, and she wanted me to go for training. And I looked at her and I said, "You're kidding me?" And then I said, well, if I'm going to go home, I'm going to ask my husband. If he agrees to take this class with me, I will know that God wants me to do this. Well, believe it or not, he said yes. He finished the class with me, but never continued on. So I became the bereavement minister at the church, and I've probably been doing it for 15 years.
Oh.
I will tell everyone, we have weekly meetings. Of course, with COVID, everything changed, which was difficult. So now we are Zooming, and that's not easy. But I will tell you, there is such healing in a group. You're not alone in your, you know, whatever grief you're going through, whether it's the loss of a child through suicide or trauma, or it's a parent, or it's your spouse. My husband just passed away of COVID in December. You're still going through grief. It doesn't change, but coming together and getting the support from others, they become therapists themselves, you know, each one helping each other. And I'm going to just suggest that if there is a bereavement group within your area, please search that out, you know. And Michelle, thank you so much. I look forward to getting the notes because I'm still new at all this. I'm still learning. I think, you know, we're constantly learning. And I truly appreciate, and I hope to hear more about this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Gosh, what a gift you are to the people in those groups. And the groups, yes, they make people feel that know that they're not alone, and they engender hope. It's just, I love when that happens in the lost groups, and you see the people that are farther out with their grief that are offering hope to the new people, and
they feel safe talking about their feelings. They may not be able to share the first couple of meetings, but they sit and they listen until they're comfortable. And I truly believe it helps.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't see where I can put my hand up.
Oh, that's okay, Rita.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in then. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. It just says Foley. Is that your last name?
Yes, that's my last name, Jean Foley.
Jean. Okay, Jean. I just want to, you know, I guess get on top of what you were saying. You know, my husband died 48 years ago by suicide.
Oh.
And there was nothing.
No.
And, you know, thank God for the Lost program. Thank God for the groups in other places where we can get together and talk about our pain and grief. Because doing it alone, and like you, Jean, I had 2 small kids, and it was just you know, life was hard, and it was even harder because we were so isolated.
Yes.
There was no place to go with it. So thank you to everybody that, you know, even came here tonight, and thank you for the Lost program, and thank you, Jean, for doing what you do.